For practice exercise 7.20 matrix add, we're going to write a method named matrixAdd, and it accepts a pair of two-dimensional arrays as parameters, and they're both integers. We want to treat the array as 2D matrices and add them, returning the result. So the sum of two matrices A and B is a matrix C, where every row and column is just going to be together. So that's pretty much it for this. Typically I use like A and B in my for loops when running through arrays, but to keep it consistent and easy to read with this I and J, I'll use I and J, and that's also typically what's used. So we can assume that the arrays passed as parameters have the same dimensions, so we don't have to do any dimension checking, worrying about adding zeros, out of bounds, whatever have you. So let's go through our matrices. We'll have a for loop, and we want to go through the first one right here. So when we go through this first one right here, we know that we essentially have columns and rows. So rows go across, columns go down. Now, if we do int I is equal to 0, this is like kind of our start, and we run this as long as our I is less than our a dot length, that's going to be the row. So we're going to look at everything inside of that row, and then we can do I++. So that's gonna give us that right there. Now inside of this for loop, we'll have another for loop, and this for loop is going to go through our columns. And if you wanted to, you could use b.length. Remember, they have the same dimensions, so dimension doesn't matter. I'm just choosing A because I'm choosing A, but B should work just as fine too. We're going to have int j is equal to 0. We're going to want to run this as long as our j is less than, and this is the cool part. So a.length, right, that gave us the row, the row length, right? Now we want to look at the columns. So to get the columns, what we're going to do is we are going to look at our specific column, right? So if we go through this row right here, we essentially stopped at the very first one, and then we want to go down the column, right? And we want to look at that specific index in the column. So if we have this array right here, like let's say we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the first thing we're going to stop at is this 1, right? And j is equal to 0, so that means the column is going to be 1 as well. If it's 0, 0, it's 1. If it was like 1, 1, it would be underneath this too. So what we're going to have here, we want the column, and to get the column, we're going to do j is less than our a. We're going to pass in our I, because our I is the specific row that we're looking at. If we were to pass in, like, it's currently 0 if we're looking at this. If we were to pass in 1 though, it would get the first element at the next column in the 0th index. So that's just how we manipulate the different sizes and how we get specific values. That's important to note, because remember, this one dealing with row and this one is dealing with kind of like the column. And then we just have j++. And then inside of here, since we want to add these together, all we really need to do is do a, and then our I, and then j. We can do a plus equals, and we'll sum it basically with our b, I, j. And that's going to be adding every time we hit another value. So we first want to look through this row. Like, imagine if there's multiple rows. We want to look through this row, and we want to add this value with the value that's in B, this value with the value that's in B, and that's going to continue to do this, because remember, this gives us the row, so we know we're looking at this row, and this gives us the column, so we're going to continuously look at every single column until we are done with this row length. So that's pretty much it. We can return from here. We'll do a return A, because that's the array that we're going to be returning. Press submit. And of course, I forget a semicolon. We passed 2 out of 2 tests, and that is how we would solve for this problem.